Welcome to USARK Florida News. Our top story, FWC Whitelist, dead. In the wake of the last FWC Commission meeting, where whitelist proposals drafted by FWC staff were rejected, the FWC Nonnative Species Technical Assistance Group, or TAG, recently met in Tampa. The group's 28 members include representatives of animal industries, government agencies, environmental organizations, and animal rights activists. Attendees of this meeting also included FWC's new executive director, Roger Young, who expressed his willingness to collaborate with stakeholders, and new commissioner Preston Ferrier.
But as far as an actual whitelist, I don't think we're likely to see that come about in either of the forms that were proposed. But I think we still have to be pretty vigilant about that.
With option 1 and option 2 whitelist proposals now out of the picture, the prospect of an expanded blacklist system seems likely. Sarah Funk of FWC expressed concern about certain unregulated species like the Asian water monitor lizard.
It started off, we were supposed to come up with what kind of characteristics or, what sort of species might we want to consider for evaluation. And then that morphed into exactly what species do you think might need to be evaluated, undergo risk analysis. Yes, I think we can all come up with species that probably should not be available to everyone, but I have a lot of concerns about throwing any species out there with the idea that we had assurances that iguanas were safe. We had assurances that conditional pythons, people would be allowed to continue working with them.
While preferable to an overreaching whitelist, which would likely ban most species, pet advocates are distrustful of any structure similar to the draconian prohibited species rules.
Again, FWC in 2019 told industry that they were not going to list species that were popular in trade and common in trade as prohibited. And then just, a little over a year later, they listed reticulated pythons and black and white tegus and green iguanas, 3 of the most popular species in trade.
These rules, which were endorsed by animal rights groups like Humane Society of the United States and Center for Biological Diversity, have led to the killing and confiscation of many animals by FWC law enforcement. For FWC, the primary focus of this meeting was on the development of a 7-tier regulatory structure, with the goal of presenting a final tier system to the TAG by November. Public comment workshops would follow across the state, leading to the presentation of draft rules at an FWC Commission meeting in 2024. Some members questioned the necessity of 7 tiers and proposed consolidating them into 3. Members expressed frustration about vague responses from FWC staff and the slow process, highlighting the need for specific details. Other topics discussed included invertebrate regulation, law enforcement clarity, and the desire for the TAG to be a true technical advisory group, which would have rulemaking authority, rather than an assistance group. Some members continued to raise the issue of Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, or FDACS, not being part of the TAG. Portia Sapp, head of Division of Aquaculture for FDACS, was allowed to speak to explain FDACS' existing risk assessment for species. USARK President Phil Goss made a presentation to the TAG entitled A Look at Herpetoculture, which described the history of herp keeping, husbandry advancements, the size of the industry, and why herpetoculture is important for conservation. Goss felt that it was important for TAG members to better understand why we keep these animals and the impact of unjust regulations on both pet owners and businesses.
I think Phil did a great job of explaining to the room what herpetoculture is and a little bit about the history and the scope of the industry.
While the presentation was well received by most, he did receive pushback from certain animal rights activists and environmental advocates in the group.
The entertaining part was kind of the expected question and answer part, because as you can imagine, the humane folks definitely had plenty of concerns, but Phil handled himself well. And, I think the humane interest folks are not always taken as seriously in the room anyway.
USARK President Phil Goss recently visited Washington, D.C. to address the Lacey Act and potential Endangered Species Act reforms with federal legislators. Goss emphasized the significance of the entire animal keeping community's involvement through emails and phone calls to elected leaders. The more constituents leaders hear from, the greater priority their concerns hold. Goss recounted how reptile keepers' calls about the Lacey Act last year had an impression on one legislator's office.
Grassroots advocacy, which is everybody sending emails and making phone calls, is so important. The last legislator's office actually mentioned they remembered hearing from a whole lot of reptile owners last year. So when enough of you make noise, we stop the bad bills.
Discussions are underway regarding reforms to the Endangered Species Act that would prevent the listing of foreign species. Listing these species restricts interstate commerce and discourages captive breeding within the U.S. without protecting the species or their habitats in their native countries. This counterproductive practice hinders genuine conservation efforts, which should promote captive breeding. Encouraging changes to these regressive policies is crucial. However, actual legislation is still in its early stages. The Lacey Act amendments propose the establishment of a federal whitelist for imports, limitations on interstate transport of injurious species, and grant the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service the authority to unilaterally designate species as injurious.
It would give them an extreme emergency designation. So they could literally list an animal as injurious, a species as injurious. The next day it would be illegal to move it across state lines. So if they listed ball pythons, for example, the next day it could be illegal to transport your ball pythons across state lines for any reason. So obviously that would have a major impact on commerce, but again, even pet owners.
Former FWC biologist Kristen Penny Summers now serves as the Injurious Species Listing Coordinator for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio is advocating for these measures, which aim to overturn USARK's federal court victory in 2017. Goss stressed the importance of Floridians reaching out to Senator Rubio on this issue. Visit don'tblacklistpets.com to send a message opposing the Lacey Act amendments. Additionally, calling Senator Rubio and ideally visiting his offices in major Florida cities in person would have an impact. See the description below this video for phone numbers and addresses. An online auction to benefit USARK Florida is happening on July 29th and 30th exclusively at bsrauctions.com. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to acquire stunning reptiles while supporting USARK Florida. Registration is very easy at bsrauctions.com. This is a no-reserve auction with lively bidding wars and $59 flat rate shipping no matter how many animals you buy. Sex and weight or length of the animals are guaranteed. We're accepting a maximum of 50 live animal donations. If you have healthy reptiles to contribute, contact info@bsrauctions.com. Prohibited species are not accepted. Join the fun and acquire incredible reptiles while supporting USARK Florida on July 29th and 30th at bsrauctions.com. The Animal Industry Technical Council, or AITC, which serves as a communication platform between Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, or FDACS, and industry representatives, met in Kissimmee. Parker Hall of USDA Wildlife Services gave a presentation on feral swine control, indicating that Florida's feral hogs could be eradicated if the political will existed. Representatives from various industries discussed labor shortages and the negative impacts of Florida's new immigration law. Reptile industry representative Marcus Cantos mentioned FWC's walkback on whitelist proposals at the recent commission meeting and TAG meeting, which was attended by newly appointed FWC Executive Director Roger Young. I discussed the venomous reptile law and unintended consequences of FWC's prohibited species rules. Both Cantos and I answered questions about the Holy Thursday Massacre, where FWC officers killed numerous pythons and a legally owned gravid boa. We expressed our hope for positive changes under the new leadership of Executive Director Young. WUSF reports that the southern hognose snake is being considered for federal listing under the Endangered Species Act after a petition by the Center for Biological Diversity. Concerns have arisen due to conservation failures with other listed species. The eastern indigo snake, listed as threatened in 1978, has continued to see drastic population declines. Restrictions on interstate transport have discouraged captive breeding. Low numbers and genetic diversity of captive snakes have hampered reintroduction efforts. The recently listed black pine snake, which has been successfully preserved by breeders thus far, may meet the same fate. While southern hognose snakes are currently bred in small numbers by private breeders, zoos are not known to breed them. Conservation strategies should include responsible breeding programs along with habitat preservation. WPTV reports that police have recovered 2 Galapagos tortoises which were stolen from the St. Augustine Alligator Farm last year. One tortoise was found alive in a yard in St. Petersburg, while the other was sadly discovered dead in a freezer. Joshua McCarty Thomas was arrested and faces charges. Microchips confirm the tortoise's origin. McCarty Thomas is accused of multiple burglaries, including stealing comic books and other rare books from multiple bookstores in St. Petersburg and Ocala. The stolen tortoises were valued at $10,000 each. St. Augustine Alligator Farm reports that the returned tortoise has been named Salvo. An initial checkup from a veterinarian shows Salvo to be in good health. Galapagos tortoises can reach weights of up to 600 pounds and live for over 100 years. Thank you so much for watching. We'd love to get your reaction to these news stories, so please leave a comment down below. Also, remember to hit that subscribe button. If you are interested in joining USARK Florida or donating, please go to usarkfl.org. Thank you so much.